Good evening, everybody. Brian Neubert here from goldenblack.com, live in Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Welcome to the weirdest and most awkward rap video of the Purdue basketball season. This one coming after Purdue's 75-66 loss to Iowa in the Big Ten tournament title game, which was then followed closely by the NCAA Tournament selection show. Why will this be such a weird and awkward rap video? Well, aren't they all? But this one especially, because iMovie has crapped out on me at the worst possible time. I normally use my laptop to do this, so I'm using my phone to do this right now. I have no idea where to look to make this look natural on your end. Not that it ever looks natural on your end. The tables are gone down on the court, so I'm here in the media room to do this with no other place to do this. Let's just make the best of this. Thank you to the Purdue Union Club Hotel and the Boiler Up Bar for your support. Purdue loses once again 75-66 in the Big Ten tournament title game to Iowa right before they get a number 3 seed and get shipped to Milwaukee. Very disappointing loss for Purdue, if you ask me. I think, as I've said from day one here, a Big Ten tournament title would at least give you a tangible championship to give you not only some positive momentum going into the NCAA tournament, but also something for the permanent record from this team. This was the team that got you to number 1 in the country, albeit for a matter of days. This was one of the more talented teams Matt Painter's had at Purdue. For them to not come away with something that would merit a banner being hung, I think is a little bit unfulfilling, is the word I like to use. This would have been a big deal. That being said, I think that the totality of this event, Purdue did play well in the first 2 games. I do think they regained some positive momentum, but I think a step backward occurred today because all of the same things that have gotten Purdue beat so many times resurfaced again. And the turnover thing is just really hard to kind of wrap your head around. Not that Purdue commits a lot of them. I think there's some things in the DNA of this team that I think are turnover compatible. I think there's some things in terms of the construction of this team that lend themselves to X number of turnovers. You really have 2 high volume offensive outlets on this team, and with both you're going to have to deal with some turnovers. So I think turnovers were always going to be kind of the cost of doing business for this team. But for Purdue to over and over again this season have these spasms of turnovers where it's like a piñata, you split it open with a bat and all the candy goes flying everywhere. Well, once there's that one turnover for Purdue, then they kind of come in bunches, and there were 7 of them in the span of 10 possessions today. Turnovers cost Purdue the regular season Big Ten title. Turnovers have now cost Purdue the Big Ten championship, or the Big Ten tournament championship. It's really that simple for this team. Tell me more about Purdue's defensive efficiency ranking on KenPom. That is an issue. The biggest issue has always been, Purdue's turnover bug, and the 2 things do go hand in hand. Your defense is not as good when you are making them defend more, when you are giving up easy baskets, and when you are not scoring as many points because you do not have the ball. It is really that simple for this team, and I think for this to happen again right before the NCAA tournament, this goes one of 2 ways for you. It either reminds you of how vulnerable you are, and that affects you adversely going into the NCAA tournament, or it puts you on high alert at the perfect time for this to happen. But I will add that it is March, whatever it is, and Purdue's had any number of opportunities this season to get on high alert with the turnover bug, and it still hasn't happened to the point where it's sustainably improved. There have been so many instances this season where it seems like Purdue's moving in a very positive direction in that regard. Most recently, the win over Michigan State, when Purdue did a really good job taking care of the basketball. And then the floor falls out from under you once again, as it did in the first half. And again, once those first couple of turnovers occur, it always seems to snowball on Purdue. It's not the number of turnovers as much as it is the impact of those bursts. It was the final 10 minutes of the first half at Indiana cost Purdue that game. It was the first 10 minutes of the second half at Michigan State cost Purdue that game. And it was that stretch of the first half here against Iowa that cost Purdue this game. Purdue somehow, some way was within 3 points at halftime after that turnover eruption. And so I guess that eased the sting of it a little bit, that Purdue was still able to have a chance in this game. But when you look at the full 40 minutes here, and you give Purdue, let's say, 7 more possessions. Let's say they had 10 turnovers instead of 17. Let's say you had those 7 more possessions. That was X number fewer points Iowa has. That's X number of points more Purdue has. Obviously, this is not anything groundbreaking here from an analysis perspective. Turnovers are bad. Points are good. But it's just something that this team, this is its albatross. This is its thing. Every team has a thing. Every team has a time bomb somewhere that's just waiting to go off. And Purdue's has gone off repeatedly this season and directly influenced the outcomes of this season to this point. Now, obviously, there's basketball left to be played. There's not a whole lot of credible reason to believe that this can happen again. I think Purdue does go into the NCAA tournament as a vulnerable team. I also think Purdue goes into the NCAA tournament as a profoundly dangerous team. I've said this over and over again. I think you have an elite guard in Jaden Ivey, and as long as he's making good decisions, he's an elite player. I think you have matchups on the interior that are pretty acute. You do need some friendly whistles at times, I think. You do need those guys to be really efficient. I think for as good as those guys were statistically today against Iowa, 25 and 25 between them, this was a game, I thought, where you didn't just need 25 points, but you needed 25 points on like 75% shooting. And I think Purdue didn't quite get the efficiency there that you would have preferred. Maybe that's me being unreasonable and thinking that a big guy 2 feet from the rim, one-on-one, should make 70% of his shots. Maybe that's not always reality, but both of those guys have done it before, and I just didn't think the efficiency there was to the point that would have been optimal to beat this Iowa team. Otherwise, I think Purdue did, a relatively decent job from a defensive perspective. You held them to 75 points with turning the ball over 17 times. That is not a terrible, outcome when you put it in context. I think Purdue has taken a step forward from a defensive perspective. I don't think Keegan Murray was your problem today. I think you did a respectable job on him. I think the problem was you turned the ball over way too much. That is the singular issue from this game, is the turnovers. So there's nothing else that matters. And that's on Purdue more than it's on Iowa. I think it's kind of a mutual thing. I think Iowa probably created some problems for Purdue with their active hands, as Matt Painter would call it. But I think turnovers were on Purdue more than they were a credit to Iowa. That is the only thing that really matters. If that number is different, this game is entirely different. You obviously never know how things are going to play out if something's different. The butterfly effect takes hold, and maybe this play doesn't happen if that play hadn't happened, kind of things like that. But just looking at the game statistically, Purdue does a pretty good job on the glass. Purdue didn't shoot well, but, Purdue shouldn't have had to shoot well. They would have had 17 more. When you forsake 17 possessions, the volume issue is your biggest problem from an offensive perspective. Just a really disappointing development here for Purdue for this to happen again right before the NCAA tournament. But, at this point in the season, you are what you are. And this is what Purdue has been when it has lost. I do think that this weekend at the Big Ten tournament, should be probably viewed in its totality. I think Purdue did a good job from a defensive perspective. I think they are trending well in that regard. They are far from a perfect defensive team. They just have to give themselves a chance, and they have to just cut the turnovers. They are not a good foul shooting team. That much has been a constant all season long. That isn't going to change because you are what you are, as I said. But the 1-and-1s, that's just been another albatross, maybe a baby albatross. I don't know what you call a young albatross, like a chick or something like that. But by my rough estimate in my head, and I haven't gone back to my notes, not that I could read them anyway if I wanted to, my handwriting is that of a small child. I believe Purdue was 1 of 5 on one-and-one free throws. I think 2 of those misses came in the final 4 minutes and 50 seconds. No bueno. It seems like I have no statistics on Purdue's percentages on one-and-ones. It seems to me like the one-and-ones have been more unkind to Purdue than the foul line at large. Maybe that's just me kind of projecting. Maybe that's recency bias. I don't know. But it was kind of everybody in this regard. Ethan Morton missed one. Travion Williams missed one. Mason Gillis, who's like an 85% foul shooter, albeit on low volume, missed a really big one there with 2 minutes to go. It was everybody. And it's kind of the story of Purdue to a certain extent, is when something goes wrong, it seems to be contagious. And it doesn't affect any one person. Now, Purdue's upside in the NCAA tournament, I think they've got to be able to make shots. I think part of Purdue's offensive formidableness lies in being a really good three-point shooting team. And I don't feel like toward the end of this season they've been that same shooting team as they have been, prior. Maybe that just has to do with the grind of a Big Ten season. Maybe that has to do with opposing game plans. I don't know. I don't think Sasha Stefanovic is right. His shots obviously aren't going in, but also there seems to be something there. And I don't know, I asked him if his finger was fine after the game. Of course he said it's fine. There's no point even following up, because he isn't gonna say anything other than that, as to not sound like he's making excuses or anything like that. But it just seems like he's impaired in some way, shape, or form. He's not shot the ball to his standard here down the stretch of the Big Ten season, the regular season, and then into the Big Ten tournament. It's a big piece for Purdue offensively, a huge piece, a bigger piece than I think people even realize, because so much of what they do offensively is dependent on his ability to, be a threat to defenses and things like that. That's not a positive development heading into the Big Ten tournament. Now, if he's healthy, or even if he's not, maybe this is something that just turns around automatically in the NCAA tournament. I don't know. But Purdue has to take care of the basketball. They have to continue this upward trajectory from a defensive perspective, and those big guys have to be really good. Jaden Ivey's decision-making is probably the singular biggest individual key for Purdue heading into March. Purdue gets a 3 seed. I was surprised, as were many, that Purdue did not get put in Indianapolis. I can't claim to pay all that close attention to these things until they come out, because I don't really care that much. Just kind of go where they send me. And from a draw perspective, my philosophy on the thing is that if you get a tough draw, you have to beat good teams to get where you want to go anyway. So, but Purdue being a 3 seed and getting sent to Milwaukee was a little bit of a surprise. I wondered if Purdue hadn't played its way into a 2 here in the first 2 days of the Big Ten tournament, but I think this was probably decided before the Big Ten tournament even started. I don't know, but Purdue's going back to Milwaukee to Fiserv Forum, where they beat Vermont and Iowa State a few years back. I was deathly ill. You can go back and watch the rap videos from there. My viral load was so strong back that year, it's probably still there somewhere, and somebody's going to get a really nasty cold because they're sitting in the seat that I sat in to do those videos. I was on death's door, and I plowed through and probably got everybody else at that tournament site sick. My apologies. Very different times we live in now. You can laugh about this kind of thing post, or I should say pre-COVID. Anyway, that's kind of what I got. This was, again, a horribly painful rap video for me, and probably you alike. We're gonna get this iMovie thing figured out. It's always something with technology. But anyway, thank you for watching, thank you for reading, thank you for listening, and thank you for processing our materials, however you process our materials. Thank you to the Purdue Union Club Hotel and the Boiler Up Bar for your support, and I will talk to you guys again this week sometime. I will probably do rap videos following each day at the tournament too, so you can get really fired up about that. Like the first day with the press conferences and stuff, you'll probably be hearing from me. If not, I'll talk to you after the Yale game. And then if Purdue advances, then either Texas or Virginia Tech. So thank you, everybody.